Gun, get down. The shout tore through the midnight air of the hospital parking lot. Emily Ward, a 27-year-old nurse just finishing an exhausting shift, froze and turned instinctively. A man had collapsed ahead of her, blood spreading across the wet concrete. A black SUV sped toward them, headlights cutting through the rain. The window rolled down, a flash of metal glinted in the dark. Move! Without a second thought, Emily threw her bag aside and sprinted straight toward the wounded man. A gunshot cracked through the storm. The bullet tore into her shoulder, throwing her small body to the ground. Still conscious, she dragged herself forward, shielding the stranger with her own body, her voice trembling. Hold on, soldier. You're gonna be okay. Rain poured harder as sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. In the flicker of lights and the shallow rhythm of her breath, Emily had no idea that this single moment would change not only her own life, but the world the man beside her was fighting to protect. If you believe true courage doesn't lie in the sound of gunfire, but in the silence of those who have already walked through war, subscribe to brave veteran stories, and help us preserve the memories, the dignity, and the quiet honor of the heroes who still walk among us. Emily opened her eyes. The white hospital light stabbed at them, sharp and merciless. The room was so still she could hear the second hand ticking steadily on the wall. The sterile scent of disinfectant, the beeping of a heart monitor, the chill from the air conditioner all blended into a strange, hollow emptiness. She turned her head. A piercing pain shot through her right shoulder as if needles were being driven into her flesh. A white bandage covered nearly half her shoulder, stained with a patch of dark red. Her mind felt heavy, confused. Then came a voice, low, steady, a doctor's voice. Miss Ward, you're very lucky. The bullet missed your artery by less than an inch. Emily frowned, her throat dry. Fragments of memory flickered, screams, headlights slicing through the rain, the deafening crack of a gunshot, the silhouette of a man collapsing. Her voice trembled as she spoke. The man I tried to save. What happened to him? The doctor hesitated, his eyes shifting away. There was no one else, Miss Ward. The police only found you in the parking lot. Emily froze. The world went silent, as though sound itself had been drained from the air. She stared at the ceiling, her chest tightening. The doctor left quietly, leaving her alone with the emptiness and the soft drumming of rain against the window. The door clicked shut. A draft slipped through the gap, stirring the curtain. Emily turned her gaze outside. Beneath the dim yellow glow of the parking lot lights, thin streaks of reflection shimmered across the wet concrete, the very spot where she remembered falling. She reached up, touching the bandage. The cold pressed against her skin, and her heart clenched. Then, from somewhere deep in her memory, her father's voice echoed clearly. You don't have to be someone important, Emily. Just be the one who's there at the right moment. The image of her father returned, tall, lean, his hands rough with years of labor, his eyes calm and kind. He had once told her that courage didn't always mean victory. Sometimes it simply meant not turning away when someone needed help. That belief had driven her into the storm the night before without hesitation. And now those same words cut into her doubts like a blade. If there had truly been no one else, then whom had she saved? Who was the man in the soldier's coat? Had she imagined it all? Or was there something someone the others were trying to hide? The soft footsteps of a nurse echoed down the hallway, then faded. A young nurse entered, checked the IV line, offered a polite smile, and slipped back out. The silence returned. Emily stared at the ceiling. The light reflected in her eyes. Each passing second stretched into eternity. She could still feel it, the weight of his body, the faint pulse beneath her palm, his ragged breath. It couldn't have been an illusion. She had been there. So had he. Outside, the rain began to ease. Droplets slid down the window pane, catching the pallid glow of fluorescent light. The world blurred behind a mist of condensation. Emily closed her eyes, drew in a slow breath, trying to steady herself. Yet unease crept deeper, quiet, but relentless. Hours passed. The clock hands moved toward afternoon. No one mentioned the shooting, no police, no news, no questions. The hospital seemed untouched, as though nothing had ever happened. Emily turned toward the closed door. A thought flickered, perhaps someone was watching her, waiting for her to believe it had all been a dream. She sighed softly, her gaze settling on the glass of water by her bed. The surface was still reflecting her weary eyes. She lifted the glass, then set it back down untouched. She knew she couldn't rest, not yet, not without answers. Her father's voice returned once more, calm as breathing. The right moment, Emily. Just be there at the right moment. She pressed her lips together. Perhaps this very moment was what he had meant. Not a moment to save someone, but to uncover the truth. That night, as the hospital corridors sank into silence, Emily could not have known that whispers had already begun to spread, and that her name would surface once more, this time bound to a secret she had never imagined. The door opened. Janet walked in, holding a cup of steaming coffee. her eyes a mix of curiosity and concern. She stood for a moment, then spoke in a tone that was half teasing, half serious. "You really are reckless, Emily, risking your life for someone who might have been a criminal." Emily lifted her head, dark circles under her eyes. She said nothing, only tightened her grip on the blanket. Janet shrugged and sat in the chair beside the bed. "They said the police investigated. They didn't find anyone else at the scene. Some think that man was involved in drug trafficking." Emily stayed silent. The glass of water on the table still held traces of condensation. Outside, the rain had stopped. The wet street gleamed under the amber glow of streetlights. Janet's voice softened but stayed cold. "You can't save everyone you know. Sometimes it's better to walk away." Those words hit like stones. Emily looked down at her bandaged hands, the red marks still visible beneath the gauze. She remembered the feel of the man's back under her palm, the fading heartbeat, the hoarse whisper. "Don't come closer." It had been real. She hadn't imagined it. The door opened again. Mike appeared, his medical coat slung loosely over his shoulder. He gave a half smile, trying to keep his tone casual. "Janet's right. Sometimes getting too involved just brings trouble. You've done your part, Emily." She looked up at them, eyes weary but steady. He didn't look like a criminal. Her voice was quiet but firm. Janet shrugged again. Mike said nothing. They exchanged glances before leaving the door, closing softly behind them. Emily sat still, her hands resting on the blanket. Their footsteps faded down the hallway, blending with the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Emptiness filled the room. The words they'd said echoed in her head like invisible cuts. She wasn't angry, only felt separated from the world, alone among people who no longer believed her. She took a deep breath, her vision blurring with tears. In her mind, she saw her father again, thin-framed silver hair, a dark work shirt covered in brick dust. He sat on the old porch step, his rough hands resting on her small shoulders. "Doing what's right doesn't need recognition, sweetheart. It just means standing firm when others turn away." The memory pulled her out of her exhaustion. She wiped her tears and looked around the quiet room. Outside, the rain had eased, but the sky remained thick and gray. She wondered why people found it so easy to believe the worst about others, when all she had seen that night was a man who needed help. On the table, her phone buzzed faintly. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Stay silent. They're watching." Her heart skipped. The message vanished seconds later, leaving only her pale reflection on the dark screen. Emily set the phone down, eyes darting around the silent room. From under the door, a sliver of light from the hallway spilled in. Everything looked normal, too normal. Yet she could feel it, something invisible pressing closer, something she couldn't explain. The feeling made it impossible to close her eyes. She drew a deep breath, her fingers brushing the bandage on her shoulder. The pain was sharp, but grounding. Inside her, the uncertainty began to harden into a quiet resolve. If no one believed her, she would find the truth herself. And at that very moment, as the night settled over the hospital, a strange sign began to reveal itself. The first spark in a chain of events that would make Emily realize the night she fell was only the beginning. That night, as the lights in her hospital room dimmed, Emily sat up after a restless dream. On the bedside table, where only a glass of water and a few medical papers had been, now lay a brown envelope, unmarked, unaddressed. She looked around. The door was closed, the hallway silent. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. Inside was a single folded sheet, the handwriting uneven but firm. "No one can know who I am. But I know who you are. Stay safe. You saved more than one life." At the bottom was a signature LT, 4th Recon MRF. Emily read it twice, then folded it carefully. She didn't understand the meaning of those letters, but a strange feeling rose in her chest, part fear, part curiosity. Outside the window, rain drizzled softly, the glow of the streetlights rippling across the glass. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The next day, during the doctor's rounds, Emily noticed 2 unfamiliar men at the end of the hallway. They wore plain clothes, looking like maintenance workers, but their posture was too rigid, their eyes constantly scanning the area near her room. Once, when the door hadn't fully closed, she caught their voices through a radio target secure. No unusual activity. She froze. Target, a target. Were they talking about her? From that day on, Emily couldn't sleep deeply. She always sensed footsteps outside her door, the steady rhythm of boots that seemed to be guarding or watching. When she asked the night nurses, they simply said the hospital had increased security for patients. But who were they protecting, and why? On the third evening, as the sunset cast a faint orange hue across the walls, she noticed something new. Next to the old envelope on her table lay a coin, old, heavy, and cold to the touch. Etched on its surface was an emblem she didn't recognize, an eagle clutching a sword surrounded by faded, almost erased markings. She held it in her palm, the chill running through her skin. Then she remembered that night in the rain as the man collapsed. Something metallic had glinted beside him, reflecting the flashing lights. Perhaps this was it. She examined it closely. On the back were faintly engraved words, "For those who never turn away." She mouthed the words softly, a wave of emotion and confusion rising within her. None of this felt random anymore. That night a new nurse came in to change her bandages, younger, unfamiliar with her hair tied neatly back. She worked quickly and in silence. When she finished the last strip of gauze, she leaned close and whispered almost inaudibly, "He's alive, and he's grateful." Emily froze. "Who?" she asked, turning sharply, but the nurse was already gone, the door swaying gently in the hallway draft. The room was empty again. The coin still lay on the table, gleaming faintly under the lamp. Emily's throat tightened. Her heartbeat quickened. If he was alive, why had everyone said there was no one else, and what was 4th Recon, MRF? The phrase repeated in her head like a coded message. Night fell. She sat on the bed, clutching the coin. Outside, the two men still stood guard, unmoving shadows stationed at her door. Through the dim light, she heard the radio again, crisp and detached. Room 304 secure. Proceeding to next phase. Emily looked toward the window. Outside, the headlights of passing cars swept across the wall, casting fleeting ribbons of light. Everything appeared calm, yet deep inside she felt a surge of unease. She didn't know what she had stepped into, only that the truth was close and dangerously so. Her hands trembled. She unfolded the letter once more and reread the final line, "You saved more than one life." Those words felt less like gratitude now and more like a warning or a mission left unfinished. She stared at the coin, then at the doorway. The yellow light from the hall glinted on the polished shoes of one of the guards, before vanishing again. A powerful instinct told her she couldn't just sit still. Someone somewhere was waiting for her to understand. She gripped the coin tighter, and in that moment she felt it a connection to something vast, unseen, and hidden. It was as if this small, cold piece of metal was linking her to another world, one built on silence, loyalty, and secrets too deep for daylight. She had no idea that only a few hours later, when the hospital doors opened and a man in uniform stepped inside, the truth she had been waiting for would bring her face to face with something she had never imagined. The next morning, as sunlight touched the edge of the hospital window, Emily heard a gentle knock at the door. She looked up to see a man step inside. He wore a dark blue military uniform, rows of medals gleaming across his chest. On his shoulder rested the insignia of a colonel, and over his heart the emblem of the United States Marine Corps. "Miss Ward," he said in a steady, resonant voice, "I'm Colonel Adams, U.S. Marine Corps." Emily shifted back slightly on the bed. The man walked closer, removed his cap, placed it carefully on the table, and took the chair beside her. His eyes were calm, but behind that composure was something deeper: respect. "The man you saved that night," he began slowly, each word deliberate, "was Major Ryan Cole, Special Operations, 4th Recon." Emily frowned, the name ringing familiar. It was the same signature she'd seen on that anonymous letter. Colonel Adams continued, his tone grave but proud. He was returning from a classified mission. In his possession were intelligence files that prevented 3 planned terrorist attacks that could have cost hundreds of lives. The room went completely still. Emily stared at him, her lips trembling. I didn't know," she said softly. "I only saw someone who needed help." Adams nodded. "And that's exactly what makes you different, Miss Ward. While others walked away, you stayed. You didn't know who he was. You didn't hesitate. You ran toward danger." Emily lowered her eyes. Her hands, still wrapped in gauze, rested in her lap, but a quiet warmth spread through her chest. "I only did what my father always told me," she murmured. "Be the right person, at the right time." For a moment, Adams said nothing. Then he reached into his breast pocket and took out a small object, the same coin Emily had found days before. He held it in his palm, the metal catching the morning light. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. Emily nodded faintly. "It was beside my bed. I didn't know who left it." Adams placed the coin gently in her hand. "This is Major Cole's challenge coin. It's only given to those who have saved the life of a Marine. He wanted you to have it?" Emily looked down at the coin, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy because of the metal, but because of what it represented. The morning light illuminated the engraved eagle and the words she had already memorized, "For those who never turn away." "Is he alive?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He is," Adams replied. "And he's asked to see you. But we had to wait until the mission was secured. You didn't just save one man, Miss Ward. Your actions preserved an entire operation and saved hundreds of lives." Emily didn't speak. A tear slipped down her cheek unnoticed. In that moment, every doubt, every sideways glance, every sleepless night faded away. What remained was peace, the quiet peace of knowing she had done the right thing, even when no one believed her. Colonel Adams rose, buttoning his uniform. He paused at the doorway, looking back at her one last time. "There's something else you should know," he said. "True courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it lives in the heart of an ordinary person, someone who steps forward when everyone else steps back." He gave a crisp, formal salute. Emily lowered her head in response, tears glistening in her eyes. When the door closed, the room fell into silence. She looked down at the coin in her hand, tracing the fine engravings with her fingertip. In the pale morning light, it seemed to glow not bright, but steady like the quiet conviction that had guided her through that night. She pressed it to her chest and drew a deep breath. In that stillness, Emily understood something profound. There are deeds that need no medals and heroes who need no stage. The truth isn't always loud, but it is strong enough to light the forgotten corners of the world. Outside, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading slowly. Sunlight poured through the window, washing her face in a soft, golden glow. And the next morning, as Emily stepped out of her hospital room, the white bandage still wrapped around her shoulder, she didn't yet know that waiting below in the main lobby were 12 Marines men standing in perfect formation, carrying with them the deepest gratitude one can offer. The next morning, as the sun rose over the hospital's rooftops, Dr. Martinez entered Emily's room. There was something different about his expression, a quiet warmth behind his usual calm. He smiled faintly and spoke in a slow, measured voice. "Emily, before you're discharged, there are a few people who'd like to see you in the main lobby." She looked at him in surprise but didn't ask why. When she stepped into the elevator, her heart felt heavy. From above, the morning light streamed through the wide glass panels, illuminating the floating dust in the air. The elevator doors slid open. Before her stood 12 men in full Marine Corps dress blues arranged in 2 perfect lines. Their golden buttons gleamed against deep navy coats, and their polished shoes caught the morning light. The chatter in the lobby faded, then stopped entirely. At the front of the formation stood a man she instantly recognized, Major Ryan Cole. His right arm was still bandaged, but his stance was straight, his eyes calm and steady. He stepped forward, his voice clear and firm, every word cutting through the silence. "4 nights ago, you saw a stranger and ran toward danger. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know what was happening. But you acted." Emily stood still, her hands trembling slightly at her side. Cole held her gaze and continued. "Because of you, hundreds of lives were saved. Attacks were stopped before they began. And men like me, we got to come home." He paused, then gave a subtle nod. In unison, the 12 Marines behind him raised their right hands in a perfect salute. The sound of their boots striking the floor echoed like a solemn drumbeat. The entire lobby fell silent. Only the faint whisper of wind through the glass doors remained, and the golden sunlight washing across faces bowed in respect. An elderly veteran in a wheelchair lifted his hand to his brow and joined the salute. A young nurse pressed her stethoscope to her chest, eyes glistening. Patients lined the upper balconies, leaning quietly against the rails, watching in reverent stillness. Cole stepped closer and opened a small wooden box in his hands. Inside was a folded American flag and a silver plaque engraved with her name. He held it out to her. "This flag once flew over our base in Afghanistan," he said softly. "It represents those who stood up for others, even if only for a moment." Emily accepted it with both hands trembling. She looked down at the flag, then up at the man standing before her. "I only did what anyone should have done," she whispered. Cole smiled, the kind of smile worn by someone who's seen both war and grace. "And that's exactly why you're a hero, Miss Ward. We were just doing our duty. You chose to do what was right when no one asked you to." Applause broke out. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, raw, and genuine. A few doctors bowed their heads. Some of the Marines clasped each other's shoulders, eyes misting. In that single moment, the weight of war, doubt, and pain dissolved into something pure respect. Emily tried to hold back tears. She pressed the flag to her chest. In her pocket, the challenge coin she'd received days earlier felt warm against her skin. Something greater than herself filled her heart, a quiet gratitude, a pride that needed no words. Cole took one last step back and raised his hand again in salute. Emily nodded in return, smiling through her tears. When the Marines turned to march out, the sound of their synchronized boots filled the hall, steady, proud, unwavering. The lobby once again fell into silence, but this time it was the kind that honors. Dr. Martinez walked up beside her and spoke softly. They said they won't tell the media about this. They just wanted you to know they owe you their thanks. Emily replied quietly, I don't need them to know my name. It's enough to know he's alive. Outside, the sunlight grew brighter. The flag in her hands caught the light, its folds glimmering as though holding the breath of those who never returned. She stood there watching the Marines disappear through the doors. In her eyes, each step they took was like a note in a quiet anthem of honor. She understood then that courage doesn't always live on the battlefield. Sometimes it exists in the moment someone refuses to turn away. The ceremony ended, but its echo lingered, and as Emily walked back to her room, she had no idea that the next encounter waiting for her would forever change the way she understood courage and forgiveness. The air in the hospital lobby gradually settled. The Marines had gone, leaving only a few lingering gazes following their fading silhouettes down the corridor. Emily remained standing there, clutching the folded flag to her chest, her breath trembling. A flood of emotion welled inside her relief. Gratitude and something deeper, like a weight she'd carried for so long, had finally been lifted. Major Ryan Cole turned back and walked toward her. His arm was still wrapped in white bandages, but his posture was straight solid like a steel column. His eyes met hers, firm yet kind. You know, he said quietly, some people spend their entire lives in uniform and still never find the courage to run toward danger the way you did in those few precious seconds. Emily shook her head, her voice catching. I just did what anyone should have done. Cole smiled, a rare, gentle smile from a man who had seen too much of death. That's exactly why you're a hero, Emily. Heroes don't seek glory. They just refuse to turn away. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down at the flag in her hands, the careful folds, the white stitching like seams mending a broken heart. I don't think I deserve this, she whispered. You deserve it more than anyone, Cole replied softly, because you did the right thing when no one else dared to. She didn't answer. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, wrapping the two of them in gold. Her thoughts drifted to her father, the man with the rough hands, who once taught her that kindness didn't need an audience, only timing. In her mind, his voice returned warm and steady, like the rhythm of his hammer all those years ago. You don't need to be someone important, Emily. Just be the right person at the right time. A tear rolled down her cheek, but this time she smiled. My father used to say that, she said, her voice trembling. Now I finally understand what he meant. Cole nodded. He must have been a remarkable man. He was a soldier, Emily replied, but he never spoke about the war. He only taught me to be decent, even when no one's watching. Cole bowed his head slightly, resting his hand on the flag she held. The world needs more people like him and like you. It's not easy to keep compassion alive in a world built on fear. She looked up at him. For a moment their eyes met in silence, a shared understanding that made words unnecessary. A soldier who'd been saved, and a civilian called a hero, yet neither felt above the other. Only mutual respect remained pure and unspoken. Cole stepped back, adjusting the buttons on his uniform. If you ever doubt yourself, he said, remember this: that night you changed the course of more lives than you'll ever know. Emily lowered her head, tears falling onto the fabric of the flag. Thank you, she whispered. But I think the greatest gift today isn't being honored. It's realizing people still know how to say thank you. Cole smiled, nodded once, and turned away. As his figure disappeared down the long corridor, Emily stood there watching him go. The flag in her hands trembled slightly with her breath, the light catching on its edges like the heartbeat of memory. She could almost feel her father's presence, close, proud, and peaceful. Outside, the sky was a clear, endless blue. The final rays of the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, bathing her face in soft warmth. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself, I did it, Dad. Inside, her fear gave way to peace. She no longer needed titles or recognition. It was enough to carry the one lesson her father had left her, to be the right person, whether in darkness or in light. And as the sun dipped behind the hospital roof, Emily stepped outside where a new bronze plaque was being mounted on the wall, the beginning of the quiet legacy her courage would leave behind. A week later, the Texas sky stretched clear and endless, a soft breeze sweeping across the courtyard of San Leon Hospital. The morning was quiet as always, except now, near the main entrance, a new bronze plaque gleamed in the sunlight. Its engraved words caught the early light. In honor of Nurse Emily Ward, the right person at the right time. Below it, several fresh bouquets rested neatly in a row. Someone had tied a small ribbon around one of them, with a handwritten note. "Thank you for reminding us that courage still lives." People passing by paused for a moment reading the inscription, before bowing their heads in silence. There were no cameras, no speeches, no crowd, only a hush of respect for the woman who had done the right thing when no one expected it. From a side door, Emily stepped out. She wore a light jacket. Her right shoulder was still wrapped in a thin layer of bandage. Her hair was tied back neatly, her face still pale but calm, carrying a quiet peace. Her eyes caught the reflection of sunlight glinting off the plaque. She stopped for a moment, simply observing. A gentle breeze stirred the American flag above, making it ripple softly against the morning sky. Emily walked slowly toward it, stopping beneath the flagpole. Beside the plaque sat an old plastic flower arrangement, faded from days of sunlight. She bent down and straightened a small card tied to it. The handwriting was bold, written in black marker from Major Cole in the 4th Recon Unit. A faint smile touched her lips. Her left hand slipped into her pocket and brushed against the cold edge of metal. The coin, the one that had found her in the darkest hours, was still there. It was no longer a mystery, but a reminder of the truth she had lived through. She held it tight as if to sync her heartbeat with those of the men and women who had given and were still giving quietly for others. An old man stopped beside her. His cap bore a faded patch Vietnam veteran. He looked up at the plaque and spoke softly. "You're the nurse, aren't you?" Emily turned and nodded. "Yes. But I only did what anyone should have done." The veteran smiled. "Then we're the same. Sometimes it's the small things that keep the whole world from falling apart." She nodded, her smile gentle as the wind. The old man tipped his head in respect, then slowly wheeled himself away. Emily stayed eyes fixed on the plaque once more. She didn't see her name as a title, but as a reminder, be the right person at the right time. From somewhere distant, the sound of a bugle drifted through the air, low, solemn, and lingering. She looked up to see a small military convoy moving slowly down the street. The American flag atop the lead vehicle fluttered proudly in the wind. The sight made her heart ache. She remembered what Colonel Adams had told her that day. True courage doesn't always wear a uniform. It lives in those who step forward when others step back. The sun climbed higher, washing the courtyard in gold. Nurses, doctors, and patients paused as they passed the plaque, some taking photos, others simply standing still, their expressions quiet. Emily said nothing. She stepped back, gazing at the flag overhead. In her eyes was pride not for herself, but for all those who kept compassion alive in a noisy world. She turned and began walking down the sunlit corridor. The light caught on the coin in her pocket, flashing faintly, like a living heartbeat. She knew her life would never be ordinary again, not because of fame, but because she had seen how a single act of goodness could ripple far enough to save a world. Outside, the Texas sky stretched wide and endless. The American flag continued to wave in the wind, and the flowers at its base swayed gently, as if whispering the story of the nurse who had once taught a whole city, "The kindness never goes out of style." And in that moment, everything seemed to merge, earth, sky, people, and memory. No one spoke of that stormy night anymore, yet everyone remembered what it meant, brave veteran stories. We remember the quiet heroes. If this story makes you believe that honor and kindness never retire, share this video and subscribe to Brave Veteran Stories so that none of their memories are ever forgotten.